The night was cold, the kind that made the city lights blur through the mist. Judge Valerie King had just finished a late dinner with her sister and was driving home in her sleek black Lexus, a car she'd worked 20 years to afford. But as she turned onto Jefferson Avenue, red and blue lights flashed behind her. Of course, she sighed, pulling over calmly. A tall, young cop approached, Officer Reed. His hand rested on his holster, jaw tight. License and registration. Valerie handed them over without a word. He looked at her ID, then frowned. This car's reported stolen. She blinked. That's impossible. It's my car. Reed smirked. Yeah, that's what they all say. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, she said evenly, run the VIN again. There must be a mistake. But he wasn't listening. Out. Now. His tone turned sharp. The flashlight beam flicked across her face like she was already guilty. Valerie's sister in the passenger seat whispered, Val, please, just let him. I'm fine, she said quietly, stepping out. She kept her hands visible, calm but firm. Reed motioned for backup. We got a possible stolen Lexus. Driver's a black female, mid-40s, refusing to comply. Refusing. Valerie repeated, disbelief in her voice. I just complied with everything you said. He ignored her, handcuffing her roughly. Her wrist stung against the metal. You can explain it downtown, he said. Her sister's voice trembled. She's a judge, for God's sake. Reed scoffed. Sure she is. And I'm the president. He shoved Valerie into the back of the squad car, the door slamming shut behind her. The radio crackled as he drove off, and through the cage, she said quietly, you just made a very big mistake, officer. He laughed under his breath. Lady, you're in no position to make threats. But she wasn't threatening, she was promising. Because tomorrow morning, that same cop would walk into court for his traffic testimony, and nearly collapse when he saw who was sitting behind the bench. The same woman he'd arrested, now wearing her black judicial robes and an expression that could turn stone to dust. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Lawyers, officers, and a few curious reporters filled the benches. Officer Reed walked in, confident as ever, holding his case file. He didn't even glance at the name on the docket. He didn't have to, just another routine hearing. But then the bailiff stood tall and announced, all rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Valerie King presiding. Reed froze mid-step. His papers slipped from his hand, fluttering to the floor like falling leaves. The blood drained from his face as Valerie King, the woman he'd handcuffed the night before, walked in, wearing her black robe, calm and unshaken. Every step she took toward the bench was quiet, deliberate. She didn't look at him right away. She simply sat down, adjusted her glasses, and said, you may be seated. The courtroom murmured. Reed could feel every eye on him. He couldn't breathe. When their eyes finally met, Valerie's gaze was sharp but composed. Officer Reed, she began softly, you look familiar. He swallowed hard. Why yes, Your Honor. I think. You think you arrested me last night, she said, cutting him off, her tone steady but piercing. The silence in the room was suffocating. Accusing me of driving a stolen vehicle. Do you recall that? Reed's throat tightened. It was a mistake in the system, Your Honor. I was just doing your job, she finished, arching an eyebrow. Interesting. Because from where I was sitting, it looked a lot like profiling. The gallery whispered. Even the prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Valerie continued, her voice unwavering. You ignored my license, my registration, and my calm requests for verification. Instead, you chose humiliation over procedure. Reed's voice cracked. Ma'am, I didn't mean any disrespect. Disrespect. She leaned forward slightly. Officer, you handcuffed a sitting judge on a public street, in front of her sister, without cause. Tell me, what part of that was protocol? He stood frozen, unable to answer. Valerie paused, letting the silence burn. Let me remind you, this courtroom is built on the very law you swore to uphold, not abuse. I'll be filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, and trust me, I'll be watching every step of your review. Reed nodded weakly, eyes fixed on the floor. Then Valerie said one final line that echoed across the room, a line that would be replayed across social media for days. Greater than, maybe next time, officer, you'll learn that respect isn't worn on a uniform, it's shown in your actions. And as she struck the gavel, Reed realized that the woman he thought was powerless had just handed him the lesson of a lifetime. In her courtroom, justice wasn't just blind, it remembered. Later that evening, Judge Valerie sat alone in her chambers, the courtroom now silent and empty. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by the quiet ache of everything that had happened. She looked at the red marks still faintly visible on her wrists, a reminder of how even her title couldn't protect her from prejudice. There was a soft knock on her door. It was Chief Daniels, head of the precinct. He entered slowly, hat in hand, looking uneasy. "Judge King," he began, "I came to apologize. What happened last night was unacceptable." Valerie didn't look up right away. Unacceptable is when a clerk files the wrong form. This was humiliation, she said quietly. Your officer didn't see a citizen, or a woman, he saw a stereotype. The chief nodded, guilt heavy in his voice. Reed's been suspended pending investigation. Internal affairs will handle the rest. He's young, but that doesn't excuse it. She finally looked up at him, her expression softening just slightly. Change doesn't come from punishment alone, Chief. It comes from understanding. He nodded again. If you're willing, maybe you could speak at the department's next training session. They need to hear from someone who's lived this. Valerie thought for a moment, then sighed. I'll do it, but not for him. For every woman and man who's ever been treated like they don't belong, even when they've earned their place. The chief smiled faintly. That's what makes you different, Judge King. You don't just hand out justice, you live it. As he left, Valerie opened her drawer and pulled out an old photo, her father, a civil rights lawyer who'd fought his whole life for equality. She smiled sadly. You were right, Dad, she whispered. Some fights never really end, they just change uniforms. The next morning, her story hit every major news outlet. Judge arrested by racist cop, turns tables in courtroom showdown. Clips of her firm words circulated across social media. Thousands commented, she handled that with grace and power. Another read, that's how real justice looks. In one viral clip, Valerie could be heard saying, greater than, the law protects us all, but only if we have the courage to remind it who it serves. And as the world watched, Judge Valerie King didn't just become a symbol of justice, she became a voice for every person who'd ever been silenced, reminding America that true authority isn't about the robe, the badge, or the color of your skin, it's about what you stand for when no one believes you can.